Please don't forget to tell us where you are watching from in the comment section, so let's begin. The rain poured like the sky was mourning a terrible injustice. Thunder cracked across the heavens as if the gods themselves were angry. In the dimly lit backroom of a rundown house on the edge of Obudu village, a young girl named Adaobi clutched her swollen belly and cried silently, her tears mixing with the rain that slipped through the leaking roof. She was only 17, but her eyes carried the sorrow of someone 3 times her age. Her world had shattered, and the pieces were cutting her from the inside out. Tonight wasn't just another night, it was the night she would be forced to marry a man she had never met. Not out of love, but because her stepmother had chosen shame over compassion. Adaobi had no mother. She died during childbirth, leaving her only child to a father who did his best to raise her with dignity. But even dignity bows when death knocks. And when her father passed away 3 years ago after a brief illness, Adaobi was placed under the care of her father's second wife, Madame Efioma, a woman with skin like polished cocoa and a heart as the mortars used to pound yam in the village square. From the moment Madame Efioma inherited Adaobi, it was as though she had inherited a burden rather than a child. Adaobi became the household's unpaid maid, sweeping the compound before dawn, fetching water from the stream even while sick, and cooking meals she never got to eat until everyone else had finished. But Adaobi never complained. Her father had taught her that humility and patience were the shields of the wise, and that no condition is permanent. What no one in the village knew, what even Madame Efioma did not know until recently, was that Adaobi was pregnant. The shame of it hit Efioma like a slap from the ancestors. Pregnant? In her house? From a faceless lover who had vanished like smoke in Harmattan? The shame, she believed, would kill her faster than any poison. In her twisted logic, there was only one solution: marry the girl off immediately, to anyone, to anything. Even if it meant forcing her to marry a man who lived beneath the bridge, who begged for scraps, who hadn't had a proper bath in months. That man was Obinna. Obinna was known in the village as Madu Nazigbo Ebe, the man with 1,000 mysteries. No one really knew where he came from. He wandered into Obudu one dusty afternoon and slept near the shrine under the ancient Irako tree. The elders whispered about him. Children mocked him. Women clutched their wrappers tighter when passing him. He was barefoot, with dreadlocks that danced like spirits when the wind blew. They said he talked to himself, sometimes to the sky, sometimes to the ants. But what no one knew, what not even Obinna allowed the world to see, was that he was not mad, and he was not truly homeless. He was a man with a past, and a secret. As the rain softened to a drizzle, Adaobi's thoughts grew louder. She wasn't afraid of the man. She was afraid of the life that was being forced upon her. She knew the culture. She had heard the proverbs passed down from the ancestors: when the flute plays without rhythm, it is not the fault of the wind, but the hand that blows it. Tonight, her life was being played without rhythm, and it was not the wind's fault, it was her stepmother's. Madame Efioma had gone to the village square that morning to arrange the hurried marriage. She met with the village chief, offering a fat goat and a keg of palm wine to speed the process. There was no fanfare, no ceremony, no dancing women with clay pots on their heads. Just a name, Obinna, and a plan to be rid of Adaobi before her shame began to show. But fate, as always, had plans of its own. As dawn broke the next day, with chickens crowing and smoke rising from cooking fires, Obinna was escorted into Madame Efioma's compound. His clothes were patched, his feet were muddy, but his eyes, those eyes, burned with something deeper than madness. They burned with knowing. Adaobi was made to kneel before him, not as a bride kneels before her groom in joy, but as a lamb kneels before the slaughter. She looked up at him, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. And something happened. It was like time froze, and only they existed. In that instant, Obinna saw not just a pregnant orphan, but a soul trapped in sorrow. And Adaobi saw not just a dirty stranger, but a man who did not flinch at her condition. The village women murmured as the marriage was declared. There were no vows. Just silence. And that silence spoke louder than any drum. What no one knew, what Madame Effioma would never have imagined, was that Obinna was not who he seemed. Years ago, he had been a wealthy businessman in Lagos. He owned properties, imported goods, even shook hands with politicians. But betrayal by his own brother had left him penniless, poisoned his reputation, and driven him out of the city. Rather than fight or beg, he disappeared, choosing solitude over disgrace. He had spent the past 5 years wandering, observing, healing. But in his silence, he had grown wiser, and richer. Quietly, without drawing attention, he had rebuilt his fortune under a different name through online businesses and discreet investments. But he kept his wealth hidden, preferring to study people, to understand true humanity. Obinna saw something in Adaobi that morning, something no one else did. Her pain was not just physical. It was generational. It was the pain of a girl born into a world that had failed her. And for the first time in a long time, Obinna felt something stir in him, an urge to protect. Madame Effioma was delighted. The wedding was done. Her burden was transferred. She did not care where they went, only that they left her house. And so, with nothing but a wrapper and a basket of dry gari, Adaobi left with her new husband. No one clapped. No one sang. Just silence, and the distant call of an owl, warning of things to come. But destiny, they say, walks in quiet sandals. What followed was a journey through rejection, survival, and a bond formed not through luxury, but through shared struggle. Obinna took Adaobi not to the bridge where he used to sleep, but to a small, clean, hidden bungalow on the outskirts of the village. It was modest, but safe. She was stunned. Was this really where a madman lived? She said nothing, but her eyes asked 1,000 questions. That night, as she lay on a proper bed for the first time in months, Adaobi thought of her unborn child. Was this child cursed or blessed? Would this marriage be her prison or her salvation? She didn't know. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. And far away, in Madame Effioma's house, the stepmother celebrated, sipping palm wine, unaware that the very man she had forced upon her stepdaughter was a millionaire in disguise. She had given away gold in the name of disgrace. But the ancestors have a way of balancing the scales. In the weeks that followed, Adaobi's life began to shift. Obinna treated her not like a mistake, but like a person. He cooked. He cleaned. He told her stories from around Africa, tales of the baobab tree, of the tortoise and the leopard, of wise women and foolish kings. He spoke proverbs that made her think, made her laugh, made her cry. He said, when the moon is full, even the blind can see. And slowly, Adaobi began to see, not just Obinna, but herself. The morning after her strange wedding, Adaobi awoke to the scent of fried plantains and steaming ogbono soup. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming. But the clatter of pots in the small kitchen reminded her that this was real. This was her new life. She sat up slowly, her belly heavy, her heart cautious. Obinna, the homeless man turned husband, was humming softly, a low tune that seemed older than the village itself. It wasn't a song of sorrow. It was a song of survival. She crept to the door and watched him. His back was turned, his shoulders broad despite the ragged shirt he wore. There was something peaceful in his movements, like he belonged to the wind. How could a man who had nothing offer her comfort? Yet, he did. Without speaking, without touching, he made the air around her feel safe. Adaobi could not understand it, but she knew, this man was different. Over the next days, their routine fell into rhythm like a well-beaten drum. Every morning, Obinna rose before the sun, sweeping the compound with a broom made of palm fronds. He cooked. He fetched water. He never once asked her about the baby growing inside her. He never touched her without invitation. In a world where many men saw women as possessions, Obinna treated her like a fellow traveler. That, more than anything, confused her. She remembered her stepmother's words, "You will suffer with that mad man until the shame kills you." But Adaobi was not suffering. Not in the way she had suffered under Efioma's iron rule. Her body still ached. Her heart still feared. But her soul was beginning to stretch like wings testing the sky for the first time. She asked Obinna one day, timidly, "Why did you agree to marry me?" He looked at her, not with amusement or mockery, but with depth. And he replied in a voice like cracked earth after rain, "Because the wind whispered your name under the baobab tree." And I listened. It made no sense. But something in the way he said it made her heart pause. As weeks passed, Adaobi started to notice things. Little things. Like the generator Obinna used at night, it never ran out of fuel. The small fridge he had, no one in the area could afford one, yet his worked quietly. He never begged. He never complained. Occasionally, strange men in suits came to visit him, always respectfully, always briefly. She once overheard them calling him, "Sir." Not Obinna. Not "madman." But, "Sir." Still, she said nothing. Because her life, though simple, was becoming better than she had dared to dream. One evening, as the sky turned orange and the crickets began their song, Obinna sat beside her and told her a story. It was about a tortoise who tricked a leopard by pretending to be a mighty spirit. He told it not like a joke, but like a lesson. The tortoise knew, he said, that when people believe you are weak, they reveal their true nature. And when you are ready, you show them who you truly are. Adaobi nodded. She understood. It had been nearly 2 months since her wedding. Her belly had grown. The child within kicked softly at times, like it, too, was trying to understand this strange world. And then one day, everything changed again. A messenger from the village chief arrived at their compound, sweating and breathless. He brought news that froze Adaobi's spine. Madame Efioma had fallen terribly ill. Her body was covered in sores. Her voice had turned into a whisper. Some said she had been cursed. Others believed the ancestors were angry. Adaobi did not know what to feel. Anger? Relief? Pity? This was the woman who had thrown her away like spoiled yam. But this was also the woman who had raised her, however poorly, for 3 years. Obinna watched her quietly and asked, "Do you want to go see her?" Adaobi hesitated. Her pride said no. But something deeper said yes. They journeyed back to the village. This time, heads turned, not in mockery, but in confusion. Adaobi looked strong, healthier than before. And Obinna, even in his simple clothes, he carried himself with the air of someone important. They entered the compound. Madame Efioma was lying on a mat under the mango tree, flies buzzing around her. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked. She looked up and her eyes widened when she saw Adaobi and Obinna. Her voice trembled. You came?" Adaobi knelt beside her. Not because she had to. But because her spirit demanded peace. "I came," she said softly, "because you are still part of my story." Obinna did not speak. He merely stood behind Adaobi, watching like a silent guardian. That evening, Madame Efioma cried. For the first time in years. She confessed that after Adaobi left, strange things began to happen. Her business collapsed. Her livestock died mysteriously. Her dreams were haunted. And now, she was dying. She begged for forgiveness. Adaobi, tears in her eyes, said, "I forgive you. But your healing is between you and the ancestors." They returned home. And Adaobi slept with a heart lighter than ever before. The next week, Obinna did something Adaobi did not expect. He took her to a hospital in the city. A real hospital, with bright lights and nurses who smiled. He told her, "You will give birth here, safely. No daughter of mine, blood or not, will scream in pain by a roadside." Daughter. The word hit her like sunlight after darkness. It was there that Adaobi learned the full truth. One evening, she heard a nurse say, "Sir Obinna, your driver is waiting." Driver? She turned to him, confused. And he looked at her, finally ready. "I am not a madman, Adaobi. I am not poor. I am Obinna Yuzoki. I built 3 companies. I lost them. Then I rebuilt them again under new names. I let the world forget me so I could remember myself. But when I saw you, I saw a kindred spirit. Someone broken, yet unbent." Adaobi was speechless. Obinna smiled gently. "I married you not to save you, but because I saw in you the power to save yourself. I only gave you the space to do it." Tears flowed freely from her eyes. All her life, she had been told she was not enough. That her worth was tied to obedience or shame. But here was a man who had seen her worth long before she even began to believe in it. Months later, Adaobi gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Her skin was like caramel, her cries strong like a warrior's drum. Obinna named her Nkemdalim, "What is mine stays with me." They did not return to the village immediately. They stayed in the city for a while, living quietly. But word soon spread. That the madman was a millionaire. That the orphan girl had married wealth. That Madame Efioma had rejected a blessing. And the villagers began to whisper again, but this time, with regret. But Adaobi? She did not gloat. She did not shout. Instead, she told her story to young girls, to remind them that dignity is not in riches or status, but in how you rise after being broken. She built a small center back in the village, Iwoma's house, named after her mother. A place where orphaned girls could learn skills, rest, and find hope again. And every day, as she watched her daughter play under the baobab tree, she smiled. Because in the end, the tortoise was right. Moral of the story: when the world defines you by your weakness, show them the strength of your silence. True wealth is not in money or fame, it is in compassion, integrity, and resilience. Adaobi's journey teaches us that no one is too broken to heal, and no past is too dark to lead to a bright future. The compound was quiet as dusk fell like a velvet cloth over the earth. Adaobi stood in front of the small garden behind their house in the city, her arms cradling baby Nkemdalim. The child's eyes sparkled like morning dew, calm and unbothered by the troubles of the world. But Adaobi's mind was full. The silence of her surroundings only amplified the noise of her thoughts. It had been nearly 6 months since she left the village. 6 months since she walked away from a life of abuse and humiliation into a future no one could have imagined for her. 6 months of healing, of learning to smile again, of waking up not with fear, but with purpose. But healing, she had come to understand, was not a straight path. The body could rest, the belly could shrink, and the baby could giggle, but the scars on the soul took longer to fade. Obinna saw it too. He noticed how sometimes, she would pause while washing Nkemdalim's clothes, her eyes distant, her hands shaking slightly. He knew that trauma had its own language, and that silence could be its loudest scream. One morning, Obinna placed a brown leather diary in her hands. It was old, with faded edges and a faint scent of camphor. "I used to write in this," he said. "When I lost everything." Adaobi turned the pages carefully. Inside were pages of handwritten reflections, some angry, some hopeful, many tear-stained. Obinna continued, "Write. Not for anyone else. Just for you. To release what words spoken out loud cannot free." That evening, Adaobi began to write. The first words on the page were, "I am not what they said I was." And with that, a dam broke. She wrote about her mother's funeral, where people had whispered that a baby who took its mother's life would bring misfortune. She wrote about the day her father coughed blood into her lap and told her to be brave. She wrote about Madame Efioma's sharp tongue and colder heart. She even wrote about the nameless boy who left her with child and vanished like mist. In writing, she began to unburden herself. And with every page, she grew lighter. Obinna watched her transformation with quiet pride. He never asked what she wrote. He just made sure she always had a new pen and a quiet place to think. One day, while feeding Nkemdelim, Adaobi whispered, "I want to go back." Obinna looked up. "To the village?" She nodded. "Not to stay. But to visit Ihuoma's house. And to see the other girls." Obinna understood. She was ready. The wound had scabbed. Now it was time to build something from the pain. They returned to Obudu village like a gentle breeze. No ceremony. No noise. But their presence was like the return of rain after a long drought. People stared. Murmured. Some bowed their heads in shame. Ihuoma's house stood strong now, 2 classrooms, a tailoring shed, a computer room powered by solar panels, and a garden. Young girls from different parts of the region had come, brought by priests, aunties, and social workers who heard Adaobi's story. The name traveled farther than the wind. Adaobi walked through the gates like a queen, humble, yet powerful. The girls looked at her with awe. To them, she was not just a survivor, she was proof that survival could bloom into success. She held small sessions each week. Not like a teacher, but like a sister. She taught them how to read, how to sew, how to speak up. She read them stories from African folktales, of strong women, clever girls, and wise grandmothers. She told them, "You are not your wounds. You are the healer that will mend them." Some girls cried openly. Others sat quietly, nodding. Each of them carried different burdens: abandonment, abuse, hunger, fear. But now, they carried them together. Meanwhile, Madame Efioma's condition worsened. Word reached Adaobi that her stepmother was no longer speaking, that she only muttered words in her sleep. Some said it was madness. Others believed it was guilt. Adaobi visited her one last time. The woman was unrecognizable, frail, sunken, hollow. She sat by her side and whispered, "I forgive you." Then she stood, placed a bowl of soup beside the bed, and walked away. Not in anger. Not in pride. But in peace. That night, the villagers said the mango tree near Efioma's hut split in half after a loud crack. No one could explain it. The elders said it was the spirit of the past being set free. Back in the city, life moved on. Obinna surprised Adaobi with a small book deal. He had secretly shown one of her diary entries to a trusted friend in publishing. They loved her voice, raw, real, brave. The first manuscript was titled, "The Baobab Knows My Name." Her words now had wings. She was invited to speak in schools, on radio, even at a women's summit in Abuja. Every time she stepped on a stage, she began with the same sentence, "I was the girl no one wanted." And every time, she ended with, "But I became the woman I needed." Nkemdelim grew quickly, full of laughter and curiosity. She would often tug at her mother's wrapper while Adaobi was working, and Adaobi would scoop her up and whisper, "You are not born of shame. You are born of strength." One day, Obinna took her and Adaobi to a large plot of land on the city's outskirts. It was quiet, filled with trees, and bordered by a gentle stream. "I want to build here," he said. "Not for us. For them." He meant the girls. The broken. The forgotten. The ones like Adaobi once was. They began building the Garden of Second Chances, a bigger, more permanent home for healing. It would include a maternity center, a library, a counseling center, and housing for up to 50 girls. Everything Adaobi never had, she now gave freely to others. When the garden was finished, they held a dedication. Not with suits or official speeches, but with drumming, dancing, and storytelling. Old women sang in Efik, children danced in circles, and the girls of Iwoma's house recited poems about hope and light. Obinna stood in the shadows, as always. Watching. Supporting. Smiling. After the event, Adaobi found him by the stream. She looked at him and said, "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Obinna replied with an old Igbo proverb, "Uniji uniya, inyegiya aknazu." He who carries himself does not need to be pushed from behind. Adaobi smiled. She understood now. Rain fell gently on the rooftops of the city, tapping like a memory at the door of Adaobi's heart. Inside the home she now shared with Obinna and little Nkemdalim, the air was filled with the smell of yam porridge simmering on the gas stove and the faint lullabies from an old Efik radio station. It was a peaceful afternoon. But peace, as Adaobi had come to know, was not always permanent. She sat on the floor mat in the nursery, folding Nkemdalim's clothes, when the knock came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. But it carried weight, like footsteps from the past finding their way to the present. Obinna opened the door. Standing there was a boy, no, a man now, clutching a cap in his hand. His eyes were sunken with guilt, his lips trembling with uncertainty. "I'm looking for Adaobi," he said. Obinna didn't flinch. "Why?" The man hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "Because I'm the one who abandoned her when she needed me most." Adaobi heard the voice and froze. Her fingers tightened around a baby sock. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the collision of past and present. She stepped out slowly. Their eyes met. It was him. Chuka. The boy who had held her hand by the riverbank. The boy who had whispered promises of forever in the shadow of the cassava trees. The boy who disappeared without a trace when her belly began to grow. Now, he stood before her. Older. Broken. Sorry. Adaobi didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just looked at him and waited. "I'm not here to beg for forgiveness," he said. "I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted to see if you survived. If you're okay." Adaobi's voice was calm. "I did more than survive. I became someone." Chuka looked around the home, the polished furniture, the framed photo of Nkemdalim on the wall. "You married well," he said quietly. Adaobi shook her head. "No. I married wisely. There's a difference." Obinna stepped back, giving them space, but staying close enough to shield her if needed. Chuka reached into his pocket and brought out a crumpled letter. "I tried to come back. I even wrote this. But by then, they said you were gone. And I thought, maybe it's better you never see me again." Adaobi took the letter, unfolded it, and read it silently. It was messy. Honest. Apologetic. She looked at him and said, "I carried the weight of your absence like a stone in my chest. For months, I hated you. But hating you only kept me tied to pain. So I let go." Chuka's shoulders slumped in quiet shame. "I have a daughter now," she continued. "She's beautiful. Strong. Innocent. And I will not let the shadow of your cowardice fall on her." He nodded. "I understand." And then he turned to leave. Adaobi called out, "Wait." He stopped. "I don't hate you anymore. But I've outgrown you. Whatever guilt you carry, bury it far from here." With that, Chuka walked away. And Adaobi closed the door. Not with anger. But with finality. Later that evening, as the rain slowed and the crickets began their nightly songs, Obinna brought her a warm drink. He said nothing. He simply sat beside her as she stared out the window. She whispered, "I never thought I'd be able to face him without breaking." Obinna replied, "Because you're no longer the girl he left. You're the woman he couldn't imagine you'd become." The days that followed were filled with reflection. Adaobi visited the Garden of Second Chances more often. The girls there didn't know what had happened, but they sensed something had shifted in her. She smiled more. Walked taller. Her voice had a new edge of certainty. She began to teach the girls about boundaries. About letting go of the things that weren't theirs to carry. About forgiveness, not as a favor to others, but as a gift to themselves. One of the girls, Zina, asked, "But how do you know when to forgive someone?" Adaobi answered, "When remembering them no longer brings you pain, only wisdom." Meanwhile, Obinna was quietly preparing something special. With the help of his team, he planned a public unveiling of Iwoma's house's newest program, the Mother's Path, a support system for teenage mothers abandoned by family or partners. It would include healthcare, midwife support, food supplies, and trauma therapy. He told Adaobi, "Your journey wasn't just for you. It was a lantern. Now light the way for others." The opening day came. It was held under the large baobab tree that stood at the center of the compound, its roots deep and wide, like the stories of the women who now gathered beneath it. The event was simple, yet powerful. Women shared stories, stories of loss, of abandonment, of renewal. Some cried openly. Others nodded through their tears. Adaobi stood and spoke last. She didn't hold a speech. She held her truth. "I was told my life ended when I became pregnant. I was told I would never be more than a mistake. But today, I stand before you, not in shame, but in strength. You are not ruined. You are rooted." The crowd erupted in quiet applause. That night, under the starlit sky, she sat by Obinna and said, "Do you ever regret marrying a stranger?" He looked at her and replied, "You were never a stranger. You were a mirror. You reminded me of who I used to be, hungry for healing, desperate for peace." Adaobi smiled. Then she said something she had never said before. "I love you." Obinna nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "And I have loved you since the day I saw you standing alone in that village square, not knowing your worth." Their hands met. No words could describe what passed between them. It was the quiet joy of two souls who had weathered storms, and finally found shelter in each other. Months later, news came from Obudu that Madame Efioma had passed away in her sleep. Adaobi felt a strange calm. She did not cry. Instead, she traveled back to the village to stand one last time at the foot of the mango tree where so much pain had begun. She placed a single white cloth on the earth. "Rest," she whispered. "And may the next life teach you the kindness this one could not." Then she walked away. This time, she did not look back. Back in the city, Nkemdalim took her first steps. Obinna was filming it. Adaobi was laughing. And in that small moment, the years of sorrow melted into joy. She looked into the camera and whispered, "This is what freedom looks like." The sky above the Garden of Second Chances was golden with the light of early evening. Birds sang in the trees, and the soft hum of village life moved like music around the compound. Adaobi stood before a group of girls seated on wooden stools under the baobab tree, her voice steady, her heart full. She was no longer just the girl who had been cast out. She had become a symbol, living proof that broken things can be rebuilt, that darkness cannot dim a determined spirit. As she spoke to the girls, her eyes swept over them, Zina, Kamsi, Chinyere, Halima, all survivors, all seekers of hope. Their stories were different, but their longing for healing was the same. "I used to think my story was my punishment," Adaobi said. "That everything that happened to me was because I wasn't enough. Wasn't good, wasn't wanted, wasn't worthy. But I was wrong. My story wasn't my curse. It was my calling. She walked slowly as she spoke, her voice like a drumbeat, strong, rhythmic, undeniable. You see, pain has a strange power. It can either bury you, or build you. And the choice, even when it feels impossible, is still yours. The girls nodded, some in tears. Adaobi paused under the baobab tree, placing her palm on its thick, scarred trunk. This tree has been struck by lightning. See the mark? It didn't fall. It grew around the wound. And so must we. A week later, Adaobi received an invitation to speak at a women's conference in Nairobi, Kenya. It was her first time leaving Nigeria, and as the plane lifted into the sky, she held Nkemdalim close and whispered, "We're flying now, my love. And no one will ever clip your wings." At the conference, women from all across Africa gathered, activists, healers, survivors, educators. Adaobi stood on stage in her Ankara dress, the baby sling wrapped tightly across her chest. She told her story, not as a victim, not even just as a survivor, but as a vessel of transformation. Many of us were born into struggle, she said. But let struggle not be where we stay. We must climb, even if our hands bleed. We must rise, even if our knees shake. Because when we do, we clear a path for the ones coming behind us. After her speech, a woman approached her. Her accent was thick, her hands wrinkled with time. "My dear," the woman said, "I heard of you even in South Africa. They call you Mother of New Beginnings. What a name." Adaobi smiled gently. "I'm still learning. Still healing." The woman squeezed her hand. "That is why you are powerful. Because you walk barefoot into the fire and carry others out." Back in Nigeria, Obinna continued his quiet mission, investing in other homes for vulnerable youth, mentoring boys who had lost their way, building a network of hope from the rubble of neglect. He never wanted fame. Just change. One afternoon, he took Adaobi to a hill just outside the city. There, he revealed a small stone structure with a metal plaque in front. It read, "In honor of every girl they tried to break, and every woman who rose instead." Adaobi stood silently, overcome with emotion. She leaned against him, tears falling freely. "This is your legacy," he said. "Not what was done to you, but what you did with the pieces." As the years passed, Nkemdalim grew, bright, bold, and full of fire. She asked questions that made adults pause. She sang loudly and danced in circles, her laughter chasing away silence. One day, she brought home a drawing she made in school. It was of 3 figures, a tall man, a woman with long hair in a wrapper, and a child holding both their hands. Above the drawing, she had written in crayon, "My family is my superpower." Adaobi looked at it and cried. Not out of sadness, but gratitude. The kind that rises from ashes and dances in the wind. The final moral of the story. Where others see an ending, the brave see a beginning. Adaobi's journey, from orphan to outcast, from rejected to redeemed, reminds us of a timeless truth. We are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to rise after it. When the world closed doors in her face, she built her own house and opened the doors for others. She turned wounds into wisdom, shame into strength, and fear into fuel. And perhaps, most importantly, she learned that love, real love, is not always what finds us when we are at our best, but what holds us when we are at our worst and still calls us worthy. So, to every girl walking through fire, to every child called a burden, to every soul who's been discarded, know this. You are not a mistake. You are a story still being written. And your final chapter can be a masterpiece. As Adaobi stood one quiet evening beneath the stars, Nkemdalim asleep on her chest and Obinna gently rocking beside her, she whispered a prayer, not just for herself, but for all women like her, and all mothers who would raise the next generation. And to the mothers, especially. Protect your daughters, even from tradition. Not every culture serves our daughters. Some customs, like forced marriages or silent suffering, were born from fear and outdated beliefs. As mothers, we must be brave enough to break the cycles that broke us. Raise daughters who know they are not property, but purpose. Teach worth before the world teaches wounds. Let your child's first lessons about herself come from your mouth, not from society, not from abuse, not from shame. Tell her she is enough, she is worthy, and her body is not a price to pay for love. Be the first refuge, not the first judge. When your daughter comes home with shame in her eyes, let your arms be open, not your mouth full of blame. Many girls like Adaobi ran to strangers because they were afraid of their own mothers. Support without control. A child's mistake is not your failure, it's their classroom. Guide them, don't imprison them. Correct with kindness, not condemnation. Ask more questions. Listen with your heart. Trust that what you plant in love will grow in time. Heal yourself, so you don't hurt them. Many mothers punish their children with the pain they never processed. Be the generation that breaks the chain. Seek healing. Pray. Learn. Apologize when you're wrong. Show your children that strength is not in being feared, but in being safe to run to. Love like medicine, not a weapon. Your love should be the balm they come back to, not the bruise they run from. Even discipline should be wrapped in tenderness. Let your home be the first place they learn about God, about grace, and about goodness. Adaobi's story is not just a tale of survival, but a message to every mother, every guardian, and every woman. Your child is not your reputation. Your child is not your burden. Your child is your assignment. Love them into wholeness, even when the world tries to break them. And remember, when you raise a strong daughter, you raise a stronger future. So, what is the legacy of Adaobi? It's not in her pain. It's in her power. It's in the way she turned bitterness into beauty. And how she used her own broken story to become a healer of others. May every mother who hears this story remember. You have the power to be the beginning of your child's freedom. Or the weight that buries their wings. Choose wisely. Love deeply. Raise boldly. The true end. Please don't forget to comment where you are watching from. Thanks for watching this beautiful story. Please subscribe to us.